Hey, here we are. The latest kilt to be altered is now ready to be shipped. So I just wanted to summarize the work done. Now you remember this thing came to me. It was too long and too big around the middle. So it looked a fairly straightforward alteration, but as I began to work on it, I discovered a couple of things. And one of them was it was made by an absolutely superior craftsman who was, I believe, figuring the process out for themselves. So we had the buckles and straps were very close to the top. The pleats had no taper whatsoever, and all of the shaping was in the A line. And this created a couple of complications. And one of them was the shaping was so profound that we had a lot of puffiness of extra cloth. And we can see that in the earlier video because I think the shaping was too profound to be dealt with by shrinking the cloth with an iron. So I had wanted to keep the original pleat seams because the workmanship was so superior, but I had to unpick them, recalculate, and sew up again. And there were some other complications which we'll look in the earlier videos to see. So it's ready to go now. The straps and buckles have been lowered an inch, or sorry, 2.5 inches, or a point 2.5 inches down from the top, which again has the net effect of shortening the kilt by raising it relative to the natural waist. I didn't want to take cloth off because wherever possible, as much as we possibly can, first we do no harm, just like doctors are supposed to be. So there we are. The straps, inner strap is done because it's being shipped rather than the fellow coming to me for a final fitting. I'm going to leave the basting in because this is a rather lighter weight cloth than I normally see. This is what in the past would be called a dress kilt. This is for indoor wear and evening wear and such like that, as opposed to mucking around on the hillsides. So consequently, it'll keep its press a little bit better en route to its owner if I leave the basting in. Of course, when the owner sees this, he can just pick the basting out with his fingers. There will be some puckering along the seams left by the basting, but that should fall out by itself. The cloth should lose that pucker by itself. Now on the inside, replace the lining, of course. We've got cotton flannel, and it's a little bit loose and baggy across the back, and I always try to do that because I choose the flannel because it wicks better, it's not so hot across the back, and it has a better hand to keep the shirt tucked in. And by having it a little bit loose like this, that helps that as well. Now, if you remember, we'd had to rob a couple of pleats because there was a greater number of pleats on one side than the other, and that has left this one fish somewhat visible. Now I've overcast this with silk thread, and I did it a couple of times to be as fine as possible. Because this is the inner apron, I thought about this for a bit, and I've kind of prevaricated about the bush, as it were. I had thought about covering this with another piece of lining, but I don't want to add the weight and the bulk because this cloth is already so fine. Now the inner apron deep pleat is unusually deep, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, because the cloth is rather light. It doesn't hang quite the way as heavier kilt cloth does. And by adding this, or keeping this, because again, I'm not going to rob cloth out for a reason which I'll mention again in a moment. By leaving this here, it's a reserve of cloth against the day that the owner's figure changes in the future, and B, it gives us a little more, well, modesty, a little more cloth hanging in the front. The reason why, now, ideally, I would have arranged the apron so that there was an equal amount of overlap or of extra cloth, as it were, on either side to make a symmetrical appearance from the inside. But I really couldn't do that without making the center apron off center, right? So we have it's at least symmetrical, even though nobody sees it. And the other reason, again, for leaving all of that cloth, again, first do no harm, I've learned through long experience that the hip measurement of a young client gives us a very strong indication about what his waist measurement is going to be like when he hits middle and late middle age. This waist is 34, hip 41. By the time he hits his 50s or 60s, unless he's extremely athletic, and sometimes maybe not even then, because we can fight DNA, we just might not always win. It's very likely that as his body enters middle and late middle age, that as it naturally coarsens, that his waist is going to go from 34 to greater, maybe as much as 40, 41, because that tends to happen in my experience. So the cloth is there so that in the future we can alter this again to make it continue to fit him. So there you go. I'm going to roll it up tightly. I'm going to pack it and get it into the post. Well, the post office closes in 10 minutes, so it looks like I'm sending it tomorrow. So thank you very much. So you remember, I always think of one more damn thing. Remember, because again, I'd said how impressed I was by the high level of workmanship of somebody who, to me, clearly hadn't done this before. We had this beautiful layout, pleated to the set, everything's to scale, everything's nice, but they had done it in a manner that leads me to strongly believe, however you wish to put it, that they were teaching themselves. And that was because on the inside we can see their pleats are irregular, and in some cases they're doubled up like this. And as I said, when I was laying it out, when we're advancing, pretend this is the top of the kilt and we're pleating in this direction, with every pleat we advance an element of the tartan. But as we were looking, as I was pulling this apart, I was finding that if the pleat was here, the next element should be here, but they were using this element. So they were basically going back and forth. The net effect outside is wonderful. It's a triumph. But in my next video, I'm going to show you how not to do that in the future. Thank you.